All right. So now when this avatar dies, the player, the consciousness, the free will awareness unit, begins a process of returning to its individuated unit of consciousness. In other words, taking that partition down, because that partition doesn't make sense anymore. That partition was to allow that piece of consciousness to log on and play the choices of that character. When that character's gone, then that partition is useless. So the partition comes down, and from the free will awareness unit's points of view, it has a body, it dies, and it becomes aware that it is somewhere else. Immediately, it remembers all of its just past life, but that starts to fade like a dream. Just as dreams fade, that memory begins to fade. And during that fading process, that partition is being taken down, and that little piece of consciousness reunites with the individuated unit of consciousness. So from that free will awareness unit's point of view, it suddenly finds itself aware, just a piece of awareness. And this awareness is given some information, our reality is given to us in an information stream, just like when we're playing World of Warcraft. That virtual reality is fed to us as an information stream from the server that serves up that game. Okay, so the memory begins to fade, and there's a transition virtual reality. I just call it the transition reality, and that's where this conscious now becomes aware. They're in another virtual reality, not this one, but another one. And this virtual reality is transition reality. The transition is there to make this transition from believing that you are a avatar to returning to understanding yourself as consciousness, and not to have that happen kind of all in one instant. That's a little much to take. So it has to be slowed down a little bit so that you can adjust to that change in perspective. So that's what this transition reality is for. It's just to give you a little time to adapt to that change in perspective. So right away, you may be greeted by people you know who have died. And you may see them and they'll say, oh, yeah, welcome. Sort of like the Walmart greeter. They're out there at the front door, and they're greeting people. They're making you feel at ease. They're making you less stressful, because right away it's like, where am I? What is this? What's going on? And particularly if you have religious indoctrination, you're wondering, is this heaven or is this hell, or what's going on to me? And you may have a lot of fear. So they need a transition place just to let you decompress a little and get through this transition and stay positive about it. Now, those people that are greeting you, they look like maybe your deceased parents or Uncle Fred or somebody, but basically that's the larger conscious system playing those individuals just to make you feel better. And they don't hang around long. For some reason they seem to be busy, and they say, well, we got to go now, go over there and stand in line and, matriculate in. And it's just a lot of busyness just to give you time. It's a lot of stalling around, really, just to give you time to let go of that. And very quickly, you don't really remember that past life so much anymore. You're just in this transition reality, transitioning to something, and you're not quite sure what, but eventually you get bored and you'd like to get back to doing something more effective, more, you feel like you're kind of wasting your time, and then you go back and get another avatar and get back in the game. Now, what happens is that your individuated unit of consciousness does a little negotiation on your behalf, because now you're it. You are that individuated unit of consciousness. So are all the other incarnations you've ever had are all part of that. Okay, so you've had many of these lifetimes. You've had many elves. You've played these characters. So you think about, well, what are my weak points? What are my strong points? Now I know what I'm doing here. I'm growing up. I'm trying to lower entropy. I'm trying to evolve the quality of my consciousness. What sort of situation do I need? And you think about that. And if you really are having trouble with that, you'll get a little help. You might even get a past life review, whatever it is that helps you come to conclusions. And then somebody says, well, here's a good one for you. It looks like the probabilities should work out. And you agree to it because you can always say no. You have free will. You can always say, I don't want to reincarnate. I don't want to do anything you want me to do. And they'll say, fine, they go find a chair, sit down. You know, they let you do whatever you want. You have free will. It's always your choice. So you agree, then you log on, or your IUOC makes a petition, another free will awareness unit, and that free will awareness unit, with the quality it's earned, logs on and starts another character, another avatar in the game. Okay, so the game is growing up. The game is becoming love. It's a game of cooperation and caring. What can we humans build if all of us were cooperative and caring? What sort of thing would we produce? That's what we're here to produce, that kind of a thing. And we will produce something else that's bigger than all of us when we're all together. Not like cells did. We're not all going to fuse shoulder to shoulder, you know, like cells did and made a human body, but we will be more mind to mind. And as a collective, that mind and mind will be a very powerful thing all in itself. So that's the next level of evolution. So anyway, that's what it is about death. You become aware that you're no longer with your body. You begin to forget this reality that you've just been through, this physical reality. You begin to think about what you're going to do next. And the whole reason for reincarnation is that if what consciousness has to do is evolve the quality of its consciousness, that is not something that you can do in one experience. There's a lot to learn there. And the thing you're doing is changing who you are. That's something that is not easy and not quick. Just like any virtual reality game, if you paid your $50 and you got a seat in World of Warcraft, and as soon as your elf died, you're out. Game's over, forget it. You know, you're done. You can't play that virtual reality game anymore. You know, you had your shot. Well, you're not going to learn much. You know, an average player, you know, goes through hundreds and hundreds of elves. You know, they get killed for all sorts of reasons before they really get the idea what the game's all about and how to win it. You know, it takes a lot of time. So my model of reality basically is a model of consciousness. And I made the model by setting up, here's the way consciousness is. Here's what it does. Here's its purpose. Now, what is necessary? What is absolutely necessary for consciousness to evolve and grow toward its purpose of becoming love? So I just built those things into it that were necessary for it to do that. So that's how reincarnation, I don't call it reincarnation in my book, I call it an experience packet, because I tried to let go of all loaded words that had religious connotations and other kinds of connotations to them. So just call it an experience packet. So the reason that these experience packets, this reincarnation is in there, because it's a necessary logical part of the system for the whole system to work. You can't evolve at a one-shot basis. Evolution is an open-ended thing, and you just keep evolving. You keep going around and around. Things change, you change, your environment changes, you learn, then you do better, and you learn, and evolution has to be an iterative process. It can't be a one-off. One-off is not evolution. It's something else. So we are evolving units of consciousness. So we need to iterate through that process over and over again in order to change ourselves, who we are, in order to grow up. So I don't put reincarnation in there because it sounded like a cool idea and the Buddha liked it. I put that in there because it's a logical, necessary component in this model of consciousness. It's required. So that's the way all my model is like that. Don't take the pieces of the model too seriously. It's like, don't confuse the map with the territory. Don't confuse the model of reality with reality. They're two different things. My model is a logical model. And all of the pieces in it are metaphorical. So the larger consciousness system is a metaphor for source. The free will awareness unit is a metaphor for that part that has to get connected to the avatar. The individuated unit of consciousness is a metaphor for that subset of that larger system that is in the evolutionary process, because just one monolithic system is very limited in how it can evolve. It can't, that's like you're working in teams of one. Well, the value in teams is that different people with free will bring in a whole lot of different ideas, and suddenly you have a lot more brain power working together than you do of just each individual all by themselves, limited to just their own experience and just their own stuff. So that's why it had to have these extra, individual units of consciousness. So that's kind of the death thing, and it gives you a little bit of bigger picture of where that comes from, but your own experience. So you are immortal. You are consciousness. You're not the avatar. You're the choice maker. And by the quality of the choices you make, you will evolve or you will de-evolve. So what's life about, really? It's about all those choices. Stuff happens. You get to then make choices. And by the quality of those choices, you evolve or de-evolve. If you de-evolve, that just means you have longer to go when you turn around and start going in a positive direction again. You've dug a hole for yourself. If you're de-evolving, now you got to climb back out of that hole. So that's basically all there is about karma, is that there's no free passes. If you don't get it this time, you'll have another opportunity and another and another and another, and those just keep right on going. You have all the opportunities you need to get there, but you have to get there on your own. You don't get passed to the next grade. Just, you got to E for effort. That doesn't work. You have to learn. You have to grow. You have to evolve yourself. So there is no punishment for not evolving. The punishment is that you don't evolve. That's the punishment. It's not really punishment. That's just the result. So, most of us are, my metaphor is, are wandering clueless on the playing field and don't really know what this game's all about. And if you're wandering cluelessly on a playing field and have no idea what the game's about, you're probably not going to play it very well. You're not going to be very good at it. So it helps if you understand, if you have a model, if you have some structure in which you can find your own personal experience, and that's important. When you look at the MBT model, you have to be able to say, I find myself in there. These things explain my experience, because if they don't explain your experience, then they're not helpful to you. It's what does this mean to me? And my big toe is just a model to help you build your big toe. And your big toe is your own viewpoint from your own experience of the nature of reality. And that's what's really important. And I'm probably the only guy that at the end of my talk, I tell everybody in my audience, don't believe a word that I've told you, because it's not about belief. Whether you believe it or disbelieve it is not important, isn't going to help you at all. You have to experience it. You have to live it. That is what's important. You can read it and be an expert on it and sound very learned and very grown up, but not be learned or grown up at all. It's not about intellectually being able to understand. It's about getting it down at the being level and changing who you are and what you are at the core of your being. So nothing to do with your image, nothing to do with, how cool you sound. It's all about you. And if this model doesn't talk to you and you can't find your experience in it, then put it down. Use the book in the fireplace. It's pretty thick. It'd probably burn for a few hours. So just, it has to talk to you individually, or you're wasting your time. So that's an important part of it. Don't let it just sit in your intellect. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Nice theory, because that won't change anything. You won't grow up because you understand theory. You only grow up by the choices you make. So where most people spend their life trying to manipulate the stuff that happens to them so that it'll come out the way they want it, which is all about ego and self-centeredness. Instead, the stuff that happens to you, you just kind of accept that. That's what happens. Now, what's important is, what are you going to do about it? What choices can you make about that stuff that happens that are positive, that works, that lowers entropy for you and for the system and for everybody else? That's what's important. Not so much what happens, but what choices do you make relative to what happens? So we need to put a lot less emphasis on manipulating life to be, so that the what happens is what we want to happen, and a lot more emphasis on the choices we make. And are those choices positive choices that lower entropy and raise quality of consciousness and help us move toward beings of love? That's what's really important. All right, that was much too long.
Masterful. Thank you, Tom. And there's two key points, there's many key points, there's two key points I want to highlight for you guys. You enjoying this, guys, by the way? It's valuable for you? Wonderful, thank you. Two key things there, guys, primary takeaways, right? First and foremost, tattoo this on the inside of your eyelids until it drops into your being. You are immortal. You with a capital Y are immortal. Own that for a second. Not the you with a small y, right, which is the elf, but the player holding the joystick. We often say, what would you do if you knew it was impossible to fail? Well, what would you do if you knew it was impossible to die? How would you live? Because most people aren't really afraid to die. They're afraid to live because they don't have a context that empowers them for death. Now, the second thing that really jumped out there, guys, I don't know if you caught it or you missed it. You chose the game you're currently in. What does that do for blaming parents if you chose them? What does that do for a victim story about, well, yeah, but I grew up in hard times and because, and oh, yeah, well, you chose the script. You took the movie to star in because it challenged you to become a better actor in the areas you needed challenging in to become a better actor. We're here to get the Oscar, and you don't do that by acting in TV commercials for the rest of your life. So if you're having a tough time right now, celebrate the fact that you chose that. And again, high levels of awareness. Whenever something is a bend in the river, when you know that you chose it at a higher level for a purpose that serves you, you shift the context of your relationship to it to empower you rather than disempower you. And from that perspective, you live a very different life. So A, you're immortal, you can't die, so stop whinging about it. And secondly, when you know that, yes, you chose the hand that you've been dealt specifically, you can stop blaming the dealer and the other players. Making sense, guys? Of course. Tom, one of the questions that keeps coming up as well, we know that reality is subject to influence. We know that the primary method most people use to try to influence is logically derived, grabbing hold of what's in front of them and trying to bend it into shape, when obviously the system has far more resources to render things in outside of the elf's ability to try to chop down the tree. So if the primary, let's call it vehicle/methodology, which you referred to earlier, is what we would call intent, is there a way that you could define that a little more and perhaps give us a a way of being able to use or develop intent in a way that allows us to modify future probability in the reality, rather than be left into what we would call kind of by me, like it has to happen by me and sort of grab hold of stuff. Would that be a useful question, guys?
Okay, sure. One of the attributes of this virtual reality and it being a virtual reality created by consciousness, and you being a piece of consciousness, is that you can, well, let me start from the beginning. I'm starting in the middle and that'll probably confuse you. So let me back up a little and start over. The rendering engine that makes this virtual reality needs the information about what's likely to happen next, so then it can be ready for next. In other words, it's rendering, and it needs to know it's an awful big virtual reality, and it's a lot of detail. So it needs all the help it can get, and it needs to know what is likely to happen next, so it gets prepared for that, so it can render it and make this all a smooth game that works. In order to do that, it creates this virtual reality, or this database called Probable Future. It's just a database, okay? And that's the system's best guess at what's likely to happen next, so that it can be prepared when and if that happens. Now, we have free will, so what it thinks is likely to happen next doesn't necessarily have to happen next. So when we do something unexpected, then it'll have to go back and fix that database. Whatever, if we do something novel, then it'll have to redo with that novel thing done, change the database a little bit and all the things that might affect, but then it's got its database back. So it does that. So it keeps this database of everything that possibly could happen and the probability that it will happen. This virtual reality is a probabilistic reality, not a deterministic reality. It's a top-down probability model. Okay, it's the only thing that'll work. So it has to have that database. Now, when it has this database of all the things that could happen and the probability that they would, it's a probability model. As time goes on, that database turns into everything that could have happened and the probability that it would have. In other words, you get a past database out of it just because time's gone on, and that future, what was probable future for tomorrow, a week later now is, 6 days gone. So now all that same probability is in the past. Everything that could have happened and the probability it would have happened, the past database. So you have this big database up there that has all this information in it. That's the information that's all available to you on the intuitive side. And that information is extremely thorough. Everything, everybody, probable futures, past, even probable pasts, things that didn't happen but could have, and all the probabilities. Now, in the Vedic culture, those are called the Akashic records, okay? But they're just databases that are a result of a virtual reality that the system has to have, because it's a probabilistic reality. It needs to keep these probabilities handy. So those databases are things that we can get into with our intent, and that gives us information that we can use in our daily life. Besides that, there's a feedback mechanism that's in this virtual reality, because any good schoolhouse, and this is a schoolhouse for, entropy reduction trainer, virtual reality, every good schoolhouse has to have feedback. You have to let the kids know how they're doing. That's really the purpose of tests, not to give grades so much as to tell your kids what they need to learn, where they're missing it. Do they really have the concepts? If not, well, you have to study a little harder and so on. Well, our reality has that too. And the feedback mechanism is that we modify the probabilities in that future probability with our intent. So as we have an intention for something to take place, then our intention actually changes that probability that it will take place and makes it more likely. Things begin to adjust. actors move, things move all over the board because the probabilities are now a little different. So that's how we can modify our reality. One, by getting information that is available to us, and by modifying the future probability. Now, there's a thing called the placebo effect that is such a what can we say, mainstream thing that drug companies can't market a drug unless it's beaten the placebo effect. The placebo effect is the effect of people changing their reality with their intents. So you tell somebody that this pill that you're going to give them, you're a doctor, and you say, here, take this pill. It's brand new. It works miracles. It's wonderful. Everybody that takes this pill, their liver starts to work better. So if you have that positive attitude, oh, good, I got a pill that's going to make me feel better and it's going to change my liver to work better, then that positive attitude actually makes your liver better. And not just that you think it's better or you pretend that it's better, it really makes your body change. Placebo effect. You can affect things that are physical with your intent. If you really, really want the sun to come out next Saturday because you've got a big picnic plan for your family, if you put enough energy into that, you can raise the probability of sunshine for that picnic. But of course, if there's a bunch of farmers who really need the rain for their crops, they're going to be putting energy into it raining on Saturday. So what happens on Saturday depends on how much probability is moved by how many people in which directions. And that's what is most likely to happen then. So that's how you heal, is you use your intent to raise the probability of better health. Because the way new things happen is that a random draw from a probability distribution of the possibilities. So you look at all the possibilities that things can happen, all the probabilities that they can happen, and new things happen by taking a random draw out of that probability distribution. Now, that random draw means the things that are most likely, have the highest probabilities, are the most likely ones to get pulled in that random draw. Okay, so that's the way the system works. And because of that, that means, like I told you, that this world that we look at, this world that we see on the news, that's a reflection of us, because our intentions help create that world. It changes things to represent us. If you are a very positive person, then positive things will happen to you. If you're a very negative person, have a lot of negativity, oh, woe is me, the only luck I have is bad luck, and I always get the bad deals. And if you have that kind of a negative attitude, that's what will happen to you. That's the way your life will be. The things you fear, you manifest. You manifest the things you fear. If the thing that scares you most of all is that your children will grow up to be drug addicts, then you will do things as a parent that will actually push them in that direction. You do things that help manifest your fears because you modify reality with your intent. And if your intent is negative and fearful, you will manifest negative and fearful things. If your intent is to be healthy, then you'll be healthy. People have a real positive intent on their health, don't get sick. Everybody else in their household gets the flu, but they don't, because they have a positive intent that that's just not going to happen. So the probability of it happening is less. So that's how you can modify your environment of what's going on, whether it rains, whether you're sick, whether you're not. So you have a lot of effect over what happens in your life. You are where you are right now. The person you are right now is basically the sum of all the choices you've made in the past. So if you don't like where you are right now, well, it's the choices you've made in the past is what's gotten you there. And as Peter says, we have to take responsibility for all those choices. If you say, that so-and-so makes me angry, well, nobody can make you angry. Being angry is a choice. You choose to be angry. You choose to be angry because of the fears and the self-centeredness and expectations and beliefs and all that stuff that you have. That's you. That's your stuff. And that's what makes you angry. Nobody else can. So it's same about happy. If you choose to be happy, you will be happy. You can be happy no matter what's going on in your life. You can be positive. You see, so to a large degree, you create your own reality. Now, you don't create it entirely because this is a multiplayer game. You're in this game with a lot of other players, and they'll do things that affect you, and you'll do things that'll affect them. So a lot of what happens in your life is just random stuff that, I call that the social Brownian motion. It's random stuff that happens because somebody somewhere made a choice that caused somebody else to do something else, which caused this and that and so on. And finally it gets to you and it affects you as well. And you have to deal with that. Again, the key is, how do you deal with it? Not where did it come from, but how do you deal with it? Doesn't matter where it comes from. It's how do you deal with it? So you have to take responsibility for everything, for your life, for the way you are. Most of your illnesses are your responsibility. You've created most of those out of stress. Stress is just negativity. Things aren't the way you want them. Oh no, that's terrible. Because what you want, of course, is very important to you. That's called ego, self-centeredness. So if we get rid of that ego and self-centeredness and fear, then we don't have stress. Things happen and turn out differently than we expect. That's okay. We just don't mind. We can go with that flow. We can make the best of it. We can find joy in it. We can learn from it. And some of that stuff may even be awful tough, but you can learn from it. Peter's the poster boy for that sort of thing. He's had his share of that kind of opportunity. That tough stuff that happens, and you make the best of it. You learn from it. You grow from it. That's important. So life isn't all scripted for you. It's not like, well, this thing was just handpicked for you to have this problem so you can grow up. It's not all scripted. For some people, it is largely scripted. For most people, it is not. It's just a little bit scripted. It's hard to script something for somebody who has free will and is interacting with a lot of other people who have free will. That's really hard to script because people can make all kinds of choices, and how that bounces around in a social system is hard to say. But all of that stuff going on with all those choices give us this wonderful degree of diversity of choice. And that's where our opportunity is to grow up and to learn. So it's not all planned. It's not all scripted. It's not like, well, this thing happened, because I need it. Well, if you look at it that way, you'll find it's mostly true. Things happen to you because you need them. But that's not really the way it works. The way it works is whatever happens, you can learn from it. Anything that happens to you has its educational side, has its growing up side. It depends on how you deal with it. And then we look back at it in hindsight and say, oh yeah, that was just exactly what I needed right at that time. Well, everything is just what you need at just the time you get it. You see, because everything challenges you to make good choices. So it's not that you're living in a scripted world that's just made for you to have choices, but everything in your life that happens and the way other people bump into you from the choices they have made and all of that, every bit of it, the happy parts, the hard parts, the easy parts, they're all there, and you get to make your choices about how you're going to react to it, how you're going to deal with it. So it's all your responsibility, and life just throws opportunity at you every minute of every day. And it's fun. growing up is just really fun.
Brilliant. Well done. Thank you, Tom. And a couple of things just want to pull out of there as well, guys. When you understand how your intent, if you choose to use it consciously, can modify future probability, tie that back to the first law we say of quantum mechanics in terms of how it relates to us in our movie. A new future is always available. Now, when you realize that, it frees up a lot of the blame, a lot of the victim story, a lot of the consequences and circumstances and all of that being trapped by stuff out of your control. Because remember, every bit of sense data that comes through, by the time you've actually rendered that into your consciousness and given it meaning, it's already out of date. So most people are reacting to ancient history and then wonder why their intent, which is focused on the outer world, produces more of the same, because they're essentially taking a scene on the movie reel that they're walking down as the movie unfolds. They're taking a scene from behind them and tuning their energy to it, which is then placing it in front of them. That's why most people appear on that hamster wheel of circumstances for a long time. But yeah, remember, a new future is always available, because if something does happen as, let's call it, an outlier on the probability distribution model, because again, you can only control what you do with your free will, nobody else's. You do have the ability, using intent, to allow the larger consciousness system to utilize the outlier that other people would perceive to be negative and find a way to turn it to your advantage based upon your reaction to it. Tom, do you agree with that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I agree with that. There's one other thing I would say about intention, and maybe it'll help you. All intentions are not created equal, so what kind of intentions actually heal? What kind of intentions are going to make the sunshine on your picnic? And the intention cannot come from your intellect. Well, not if it's going to be a strong intention. It can come from your intellect, but that's generally not such a strong intention. The intention needs to be focused to where your mind is not running all sorts of thoughts in your head all at once, but just what you're focused on. And usually we learn how to meditate to get rid of all those extraneous thoughts so that we don't have those running through our head, so we can really focus. Okay, we have to have some force behind it, and that force comes from two things. It comes from, one, really caring about what's happening. So if you're healing somebody and you're just doing it for fun, you're not going to be very effective. You have to really care about that person, and that they feel better and get better. It has to be important to you at a deeper level. You see, that deeper level is what I'm calling the being level. That's you in your intuitive space, not your intellectual space. So you have to do these things from an intuitive space. Another way to describe that is, you've probably heard the term being in the zone. Now, all of you from Germany, that means a red light district. So that's not what I'm talking about. Being in the zone, at least in my culture, means that you drop into an intuitive space rather than an intellectual space. So if you're an athlete and you're thinking about, is my stride right? Am I holding the javelin properly? Is my stroke just right? If you're thinking about those things, you're never going to win many races. You have to get to the point where you just do it right. If you're touch typing, you don't think, well, where's the key? Where's the X and where's the E and where's the T? If you do that, you'll never type very fast. You have to get to the point that it's intuitive. So there's everything you do in life that is not trivial. You can do better, faster, more accurately from an intuitive space than you can from an intellectual space. Athletes will tell you that their winning is 80, 90% mental. It's getting in that intuitive space. Everybody trains hard. Everybody's strong. Everybody knows, the style and the strokes and whatever else, the holds. But it's the people who have their mind focused right are the ones that end up winning. Okay, so all intents are not equal. If you just say, gee, I'd really like for the sun to shine, that would be nice, and that's just your intellect making a wish, that doesn't carry a whole lot of force as far as modifying future probability. You have to have that intent. It's not just making wishes. That has to be from your being level. Your being level is the core of you. You're intuitive. It's your deepest places, your insides. That's where that knowledge, that's where that intent has to come from. That's where that caring for the healing has to come from. So if you can put yourself into that intuitive space, then you will find that all of the paranormal things, healing, modifying future probability, getting data out of databases, remote viewing, all those things become simpler, much easier from an intuitive space. The reason that these things have such a reputation of being hard to do is because most of us are locked into intellectual space. We think about things. And to get in that intuitive space and live our life from that intuitive space is a difficult thing for us to do. But once we do that, your life will change completely. Living in that intuitive space. And much of what Peter's telling you when he's talking to you about, don't take that picture, in the past and project that into the future. Otherwise, your future just looks like your past and you don't seem to be ever able to get anywhere that way. That's because you're living out of your intellect, and your intellect is doing analysis on that past and then trying to do analysis on what you should do in the future. And you're not really working from the core of you. You're working from that intellect. Now, the intellect is important. The intellect is your director. It's the intellect that sends you in the right direction. So knowledge is important, but intention, action needs to flow out of your intuitive space. And if it does, it will be smooth, it will be coordinated, it will be elegant, and it will work so much better. You have to not live out of your intellect. A hard thing for people in the Western world to grasp, because we in the West have honed our intellect since we were in kindergarten and probably before, and we tend to live out of our heads. We do what we think we should do. We be the way we think we should be. And we end up images of ourselves rather than being ourselves. So we act kind because we think acting kind is what we should do. So if we see a place and we see that we should act kind, then we do it because that would be the right thing to do. That's an intellectual thing. It's different than being kind. When you are kind, you just do those things just because you do them. They're just your natural way you are. You don't have to think about it and say, oh, see that little old lady there wants to go across the street. Look, she's having trouble, but I should probably help her. And then you'll look around and see if there's any people that'll notice you helping her and you'll get credit, and then you go back to the office and you tell them, yeah, well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I had to help this little old lady across the street. And all of that's coming from the intellect and the ego. If you just are kind, you see somebody that needs your help and you're able to help them, just do it. It isn't a matter of, is it part of your image? So we don't want to go through life acting and in an image and living our life unauthentically, trying to do what's right. We need to be what's right. It's not about doing, it's about being. And changing yourself at the being level, changing who you are, is not changing how you act or how you respond. Now, when you change who you are, you act and respond very differently. And yes, when you're learning to get into that being level, that's the old thing about, fake it till you make it. It does help for your intellect to try to be kind and act kind until you become kind, but make sure you don't get stuck just acting kind. That's not enough. You won't grow up. You don't lower your entropy. You don't increase the quality of your consciousness because you act kind, because you read books, because you've got a good model and got good understanding, and you can have, great conversations. That won't help you grow up at all. You have to be kind. You have to, what do they say? Walk the talk. You have to be it. So it's not how you act. It's not the things you do. It's what you are inside. And you need to be 100% responsible for what that is and for the choices that you make. So that's the thing about intent. It's not just like making a wish. It's part of you at a deep level. So, and you will find if you go to remote viewing classes and get expert remote viewers to teach you remote viewing, the hardest thing they have to teach you and the most difficult thing for you to learn is to get out of your intellect and get into your being level, get into your intuitive space, your intuitive level, not your intellect. That will make everything in your life different if you live your life out of that authentic, intuitive self. And that's scary for people. They don't, changing who they are is a scary thing. If I stop acting, then maybe people won't like me very much. I might not be if I just am who I am, how's that gonna play on the outside world? I have to smile even when I don't mean it, and I have to do a lot of acting. Well, you may have to in certain situations, and there's no problem with that, but don't let that be what runs your life. Don't let that be what's at your core. Sometimes you have to act, but that needs to be just an act, not what you pass off to the world as who you are. So intentions take some time to make strong. And most of that time is in letting the intellect go and getting into an intuitive being level where things do matter and you do care. And now you have some force behind that intention. It won't just be a one-off to see, well, I wonder if I can make this happen. You can do that when you're playing with it, but you need to also go beyond that.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, Tom. I've got one more serious question, and then I'm going to got a whole bunch of some fun questions we can jump into. I'm kind of pushing for. I see everybody's still here and attentive, so thank you guys. And Tom, if you've got time, I'd love to sort of go probably another 45 minutes, which would be the bottom of the next hour.
I've got time.
Fantastic. Thank you. The serious question I have is obviously if you look at what I call the default movie, rather than being the star of your own movie, in the sort of bigger scheme of the game at the moment, there is a lot of stuff going on that is, to use my metaphor in the movie, sucking a lot of people into a fear-based film extra in a big budget disaster movie. Should we call it the Corona movie, etc. There's a lot of stuff going around. What advice would you have for people on being able to have an empowering relationship to the outer world, regardless of what is going on at the moment, over and above what we've already said at this point, but just especially right now, as again, to use another metaphor I have in terms of sailing down the river of your life, when the river's wide and the current's slow and there's no other traffic, it's pretty easy to kick back and not have to pay too much attention. But if the river narrows and the current speeds up and there's more traffic, you've got to really pay attention as a strong sailor to bring your skills to bear. And what a lot of people are finding right now is that in this, I guess, over-exaggerated level of negativity that's being somewhat thrust into the scenes of other people's movies, is there something you can do to be able to give it a little bit of empowering context on how to relate to that in a way that keeps you from hitting the rocks or being boarded by pirates?
Yes, the first thing, the most important thing is don't let negativity trap you. Don't let negativity suck you in. Don't let it pull you in. Don't become negative because you see others being negative. If you do, then you cease being part of the solution and become part of the problem. So you look out into the world and you see things are dicey out there. Yeah, the current's running fast and the river's maybe wide as well. And you're wondering how you're going to negotiate that. Realize that you have a lot more choices than you think. When you think that, well, I'm stuck, I'm between a rock and a hard place, and I don't have any good choices, that's probably because you're only looking at the choices that you want. You're only looking at what you call good choices. There are a limited set of choices. They're the choices that this is the way you'd like it to happen. And rather than be tied down by what you'd like to have happen, tied down to this is the way it needs to be, this is the way it should be, this is the way I want it to be, all of that is ego. And that will trap you in these, fearful times. That will trap you in, into being a part of the problem rather than a solution. One more fearful person running around screaming that the sky is falling is not going to be helpful. So don't let the fear make you negative. So you listen to a debate, or you watch the news of who's doing what to who, and where the crime is, and all of that negative stuff. If you see that and it starts bringing you down, oh wow, this world really sucks. It's a horrible place to be. Turn off the news. Don't look at it. Just turn it off. You don't need to know all of that details. Don't immerse yourself in negativity. And that's what mostly you're going to get from the media, not just news, but from the movies and books and much of our social art and writing, pictures, all sorts of things. They tend to be negative. They tend to be violent. It tends to be control, power, force based. And if it is, just don't involve yourself in that sort of thing. Just let it go. You don't have to be a part of it. And if where you do have to be a part of it, don't let it pull you down. Don't let it attach to you. Don't let it connect to you. If your own fear connects to it, then you've got this connection. It's going to affect you. So as you get rid of your fears, that stuff just runs by you. It doesn't really stick. It only sticks to you if you have a fear or a belief that pulls you into that particular current. If you don't, then it flows by and runs right over you, right by you, and doesn't stick at all. You can be a joyful person in a nasty place. It's really not all that hard. You just don't have to make yourself part of that nastiness. So when you see something and it upsets you and you start complaining and raving and shaking your fist and how could they be so stupid and all that sort of thing, you become part of the problem. You're not part of the solution like that. You're part of the problem. Angry people are part of the problem. And somebody will tell you, well, if you're not angry, then, you should be angry. Everybody should be angry about this. No, anger never helps. Fear never helps. You should be aware. You should be engaged. You should be connected to things. You should be, trying to make the world a better place, not a worse place by you adding your anger to the anger that's already there. So you let people be how they are, and you don't connect to other people's negativity. Let them keep it. It's theirs. You don't have to then get negative in response to that negativity. But if you have beliefs and ego that, connects you to that negativity, then you're going to get swept right up in it. You're going to be a reactor. And then you'll be upset, an unhappy person living in an unhappy world. So that's the main thing. Don't get negative. Stay positive. And some people say, how can you possibly stay positive with all this horrible stuff going on? Well, you can. I don't mean that you just say, oh, well, horrible stuff, not my business, and you turn away from it. No, you have some responsibility to make the world a better place. Yes. But you have to make the world a better place through positive means. If you make the world a better place through negative means, through control, power, and force, it's not going to last. It's not going to work. You know, we talk about, well, if we could just get rid of those politicians and get rid of these CEOs and get rid of that corporation that's so abusive, and if we could just do that, the world would be such a better place. The world wouldn't change at all. Or if it did, it would only change for a very short time. That dysfunctional world is dysfunctional because we, humanity, are dysfunctional. That's why that world's dysfunctional. It's not because of that executive and those politicians and, you know, law enforcement and all the other bad actors out there. They don't make it. They're not the ones that mess it up for all of us. We make it the way it is because the way we are, all of that stuff reflects us. So the best thing you can do when times, you know, when the pucker factor is high, that's one way to put it. When the pucker factor is high, one thing you can do is stay positive. Don't get sucked into the negativity. Don't join it. Yes, be proactive in being happy, in peace, in helping others, but do it from a positive direction. If you go up to somebody and say, you guys are doing it all wrong, you're the problem here, you will just push them deeper into that problem. And you will become part of their problem. That's not helpful, you see. So yes, you're supposed to fight fire with fire, but all you do is make a bigger fire most of the time. You don't really fix things. What needs to be fixed is the quality of consciousness. When that changes, all the rest of that stuff will fix itself because we're creating that reality. And how do you change the quality of consciousness? Well, you can only change one person, and that's yourself. You can't change anybody else. So your optimal contribution to this being a kinder, gentler, happier place is for you to change yourself, make yourself a happier, gentler, kinder person. And that's your maximum contribution. Now, you can maybe help other people change themselves, but you can't force or push anybody else to change. You can give them an environment in which they can change themselves more easily. But what is that environment? What environment gives somebody the opportunity to change themselves? Not a hostile environment. That does the opposite. You have to give them a positive environment, an environment that is supportive environment, an environment where they can take a risk and know that it'll be all right. So you give people support, show them something better, give them a good example. And that's as much as you can do. You can't make them grow up. So accept them for the way they are, have compassion for them, not anger. Let all that anger turn into love and compassion and caring for those people because they're unhappy and miserable people. And you don't want to be one of them. So just don't get sucked in. So you find yourself in a very tough place. I mean, everybody is finding themselves, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people are finding themselves in a tough place these days. Well, that's that stuff that happens. Now, your job is to make choices that help you evolve the quality of your consciousness. You're supposed to make good, positive choices with that. Whatever those choices are. And if you do, you'll end up a smiling person. You'll end up happy. You don't need a lot of stuff to be happy. Stuff doesn't make you happy. Yeah. What makes you happy is being useful, being helpful, you know. And you do that only by being positive. So that's the thing. Don't get drugged into it. If you start getting angry because you see people hurting themselves, hurting each other, being unkind, anger adds to that dysfunction. Upset adds to that dysfunction. Stress adds to that dysfunction. Do what you can to change it, but you can't do that by pushing, by forcing. You have to do that by good example and by giving people safe space to change themselves. Otherwise, it just goes on and on and on, as we can see. You know, we can look at history and say for the last 100,000 years, we've been stuck in warlord mentality. control, power, force. And all the players have changed many, many times in 100,000 years, but basically it's the same thing going on again and again. So just changing the players won't help. You got to help those players grow up. So, and you can only do that mostly by growing yourself up, being that positive person that always has something positive to say or doesn't have anything to say at all.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tom. No, bang on. It reminds me of a quote from Wayne Dyer. It says, see the light in others and then treat them as if that's all you see. And I'm going to quote from one of my favorite authors of past. He passed away the year I was born, the great Neville Goddard. And I've got a couple of quotes here that I was reading yesterday, actually. I just pulled up that Tom certainly has referred to, and as the concept, just to drill in, it says, there is nothing to change but our concept of self. As soon as we succeed in transforming self, our world will dissolve and reshape itself in harmony with that which our change affirms. Okay. And then to put the last quote in there, again, there is no one to change but self. All you need to do to make men and women whole in this world is to make yourself whole. You are incapable of seeing anything that is unlovely when you establish within your own mind's eye the fact that you are lovely. Great words from Neville there.